Okay. All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. May I have attention, please? All quiet, please. Thank you. Go ahead, take out your notes so you have those ready to go. We're going to be continuing on with the Protestant Reformation in England. And we haven't really gotten to, like, the religious issues. We've been talking about who's marrying who, and are they having a kid, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we're going to be looking at that. Just by way of reference, when you come in on Thursday, we'll talk a little bit about how the election and so forth turned out. I got all your predictions and so forth in here, so we'll see how that plays out. I'll be watching that tonight. I'll also be watching, if you look right behind you, that green poster. Do you see that there? What does that say? Jim Hansen, Ada County Highway District. That's my brother. Can you read, like, at the very bottom where it says, like, who his treasurer is? Who's that? Who's that? That's me. That's my brother, my older brother. He's on the Ada County Highway District. That is the 5 commissioners are in charge of, like, all the roads and stuff, most all the roads in Ada County. It's really, really interesting stuff. There are 3 candidates, or 3 districts of the 5 that are open this time that are being contested. My brother's one is way over in the eastern part of the county, so you guys, I don't think any of you guys would live in that particular district. But that's one of the things that's on the ballot today. So I'm going to be watching that result. I'll obviously be watching the presidential race and all sorts of things. So we'll see how that plays out. Right? Questions? Comments? You ready? All right, let's do this. Let's recap where we were with who is in charge in Britain. Remember, we had the War of the Roses, Red Rose, White Rose, Lancaster, York families fighting. They ultimately reach an agreement, and, well, somebody wins. And we get Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. Hoorah! Things are settled. They want to have kids, right? Which did they prefer, boys or girls? Why? Because boys are strong, and everyone believes that boys will make better rulers. I mean, hello, look at the presidents. Have we ever had a girl for president? We've had democracy. Have women been able to vote? Only for the last 100 years in this country have women been able to vote. Idaho, a little longer. Idaho gave the right to vote for women in the late 1800s. I don't know, are we ever going to have a woman up on the board there as President of the United States? Hopefully. Do you think it will happen in your lifetime? Raise your hand if you think in your lifetime we will have a female President of the United States. I'm like, I've got my hand up, and I've got, like, less to go, to the finish line perhaps than some of you guys. It is interesting because some of you guys, how many of you guys predicted Biden was going to win? How many of you guys predicted Trump was going to win? You got 2 predictions of Trump. If Biden is elected President of the United States, that would be a first, not so much for Biden, but his running mate. The vice presidential running mate is who? That lady. That lady. Some lady. Kamala Harris, right? Democratic senator from the state of California. And who knows? I mean, sometimes you look through here, you're like, president, president, president. Oh, we got some people that served as vice president that came in and took the role of president after the president died or resigned or something like that. But it is interesting. In American politics and so forth, generally there is the view of men can make better rulers. Well, did you have that written down? That was the opinion back in those days. Men make better rulers. And if women are set to become the next ruler, then people are like, oh no, they might get overthrown. This is going to be a real problem. We'll see this. Oh no, if a woman is going to be the next ruler, because that's the thing. Henry and Elizabeth, what if they just had girls? Who would be the next monarch? Blake, who would be the next monarch if they just had girls? It would be a girl, yeah. And the oldest one. Usually back in those days, if they had, like, the oldest was a girl and then the second was a boy, the boy would go. The boy would be the one who would get to become the next monarch, the king. So they actually had that. But it's fascinating because as we go through here, we'll see eventually before we finish the story, there will be proof on the part of some that girls cannot rule very well. But then there will be proof on the part of another person that girls can actually rule quite well, thank you very much. But there's still that attitude. Girls cannot do the job that is necessary in order to be a strong leader. Girls are too, I don't know, what are girls are too what? Fragile, sensitive, emotional, whatever, right? Those sorts of things. And as somebody actually in the other class was like, well, they're not given the education. Generally, for girls in most of society, they're not given the education necessary back in those days. But we'll see. If you're in the royal family, girl or boy, you're going to get an education. Okay? So you will get an opportunity to learn some things that will be helpful. So, what were the names? Oh, before I put the thing up here, raise your hand if you can tell me. What were the names of the two boys that they had? Yes, go for it. Very good, in that order. And Arthur got married to Catherine of Aragon. What family was she from? A very important royal family in Europe. It's the Habsburgs, okay? And the Habsburgs were in charge of Spain and Austria and parts of Italy and the Netherlands. They're a very important one. What happened to Arthur? He died, yeah. And he died, did he die before he became a father? Yep. Yes, and to handle the intimate question, because you're in high school now, this is actually going to be important to this story. Did he die before he had an intimate relationship with his wife? Yep. So they were both very young. Very, very young when they got married. And he died literally, within 6 months or so. Okay? So is that it? Is Catherine of Aragon from the powerful Habsburg family no longer in the English royal family? No. Because the parents made an arrangement for, now that Arthur's gone, bye-bye Arthur, Catherine can now get married to Henry. And what did it require? What did it require to make that first marriage go away? Because you're not supposed to marry your sister-in-law. And Henry was marrying his sister-in-law. What was that word? Annulment, right? And who can give an annulment to make it like the marriage never happened? The Pope, very good. The head of the Catholic Church. At this time, right? You understand this? At this time in England, there's no Protestant Reformation. It hasn't even happened yet, I don't believe. Okay? It hasn't even happened. So the Pope's in charge, gives the thing. The Pope's like, hey, I like the Habsburgs. Hey, I like the English royal family. We'll make them both happy. We'll pretend that first marriage never took place. And now we've got Henry, who eventually becomes king. You can write it down. King Henry VIII. And his wife, Catherine. And they have a kid. I think this is where we left off last time. Right? Did we get the name of the kid? What's the name of the kid? First of all, is it a boy or a girl? Does it matter? How many guys, raise your hand, want to have kids? Nobody? Oh, there we go. At least we got a couple of people. A few people want to have kids. How many guys want to have a boy? How many guys want to have a girl? How many guys want to have boys and girls? There you go. How many guys don't want to have any boys? How many guys don't want to have any girls? It's like I'm one of 2 boys and 5 sisters. Yeah. So anyway, Henry VIII and Catherine had, a baby girl. That's the name of the daughter. Mary. Is that cool? She gets to be the next monarch. What would her title be if she became the next monarch? What would her title be? Queen, exactly. Yeah, she'd be queen. She'd be queen. So anybody have any problem with that? Well, you had a problem with that? Write it down. Henry had a problem with that. And you can say, well, if Henry's being like, not anti-girl or anything, he could say, well, my daughter would do a fine job of ruling. But here's the problem. If enough people out there think that you're weak, they might try and test you on it. And he's like, I don't even want my country to be tested. I don't want there to be a girl in charge of my country after I die. I don't want there to be a problem. So what does he do? What is he going to go to his wife and say, could you have another kid, please? And this time, could it be a boy? Is that how it works? You just go to your spouse and go, can I have a boy? And they're like, oh, let me just get on Amazon and like order up. Oh, let me see. I already got a girl. Let's get a boy this time. Is that how it works? It doesn't work, right? Now, you could be like, they're married for a long time. They could have multiple kids. They just had the one. And after a while, write this down. They'd been married for quite a while, and there weren't any more kids come along, yeah. No. Kids, sometimes it just, pregnancies, sometimes they just don't happen. Or back in those days, a lot of times you had pregnancies that didn't finish. Or if you did have an infant in birth, sometimes they died at a pretty high rate. And also the women died at a pretty high rate, sadly. Because a lot of different complications can happen in childbirth, and they didn't have really good medical procedures and things like that back in those days. So here's the fact. You get to a point in the marriage of Henry and Catherine, and there are no more kids. They just got the one. They got Mary. And Henry's got to figure out what's the problem. Is it him or is it his wife? Well, all right. He wants to do the best for his country, right? So he's thinking, what's best for my country is to have a boy. Well, if you think, Henry is just really not really, doing things for personal reasons and so forth. He's a pretty good guy. Let me just throw in a couple of other facts. You see, Henry knew that the reason why they weren't having kids wasn't him. It was his wife. How did he know that? How did he get like a doctor to give an opinion? How could he possibly know that he could still have children, but his wife couldn't? He was a little bit younger. This is true. And there was evidence. He was still having children. You can write that down. He was still having children. How could he have children and his wife not have children? I don't understand. What is going on there, Henry? How is he having children and his wife is not having children? Do you need that explained to you? He's the king, yeah? He cheated on his wife. Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair way of saying that. So who's going to punish the king for cheating on his wife? He's the king. He gets away with it. Okay? So he's having kids. His wife is not having kids. He wants to have a son. Now, understand this. Make sure you write this down. If he has a kid with a woman, not his wife, doesn't that kid count? Well, it's like they're a human being and they count for a lot of things, but they do not count for inheriting the throne. Do you understand that? Make sure that you have that written down. They're not in the family. They would not be considered a legitimate birth of the king within the royal marriage. So they have another name for that. It's not very nice, but they would call that child illegitimate. Actually, there's an even nastier word to describe a human born outside of wedlock. You know what that word is? Starts with a B, rhymes with asterd. Oh, that word. Have you heard that word? Yeah, that's the official definition of that word. The child is born outside of wedlock. So did Henry have asterd children? Yeah, he had several. Yeah. Do they count toward inheriting? No, they don't. Not toward inheriting the throne. So, help me out here. Raise your hand if you can tell me. Henry VIII, he really likes his first wife quite a bit. They've been through a lot. They were married a lot of years, but he wants to have a boy. What could he do? Yes? What? Wow, you go straight for the jugular. Just kill his wife. Just, oh, honey. Is there anything kind of a little milder than kill his wife? get multiple wives. That's an interesting proposition. Write this down. That was not allowed for in the Bible. There was pretty clear evidence as far as how they read the Bible and so forth. You can only have one wife at a time, one spouse at a time. Okay? In Islam they allowed for, I think within Islam they allowed for 4 at a time, although some Muslim rulers and so forth are like, hey, whatever, they have lots and lots and lots. So let's see, kill multiple wives. Let's rule those 2 out. Another alternative. How can you have a wife who's not this person? Yes? Secret marriage. That won't work. It needs to be all public. Yes? Thank you very much. Write it down. Divorce. Henry wants a divorce. What's a divorce? The marriage breaks apart. Okay? Now, who's in charge of allowing for marriage? The church. And we also got the annulment. That wasn't really a divorce, but that kind of like the marriage never happened. So Henry wants a divorce. Write it down. Henry wants a divorce. He wants a divorce from his first wife. And she's like, I'm not in favor of a divorce. I am the queen, and my daughter is going to be the next monarch. And so, like, who's in charge of getting of allowing for a divorce? The Pope. The church is. Write that down. The Pope is. This is very important now. Henry VIII wants to get a divorce. And he sends a message to the Pope. He didn't go himself. He sends one of his top people. And the Pope looks at it. And the Pope is actually looking, and he's like, you know what? I kind of like Henry VIII. In fact, by this time, write it down. The Protestant Reformation has already started. By this time, the popes are communicating, pope each in a turn. There's only one pope at a time. They're communicating with the different leaders around Europe. And Henry VIII is like, I got your back, Pope. I got your back. Catholic faith, that's what we do here in England. Mm-hmm. And the Pope's like, you, Henry VIII, boom, you're the defender of the faith. I like you. Yeah. So the Pope and Henry VIII, they're actually getting along pretty well. Right? And Henry VIII would be like, yeah, I should have probably never married Catherine in the first place. She was my sister-in-law, and my parents should have never got that first marriage annulled so that I could get married to my sister-in-law. So can you just kind of undo the whole thing? The Pope wanted to help Henry VIII. He really did. He wanted to, for various different reasons. It's like, yeah, let me see what I can do to help you out there. But there's a little bit of a problem. Because, don't upset the Habsburgs? You can write that down. Don't upset the Habsburgs. Who the heck are the Habsburgs? Well, I'll tell you what. The Habsburgs didn't want a divorce to take place. So who cares about the Habsburgs? Sophia, why should we care about what the Habsburgs thinks? Henry wants a divorce from his first wife so that he's already got his second wife picked out. She was a lady-in-waiting helping Queen Catherine. And Henry's like, yeah. In fact, here's the deal. Drama. Henry had already had intimate relations with this woman's sister. The woman was named Mary Boleyn. Anne Boleyn was like, stop, Henry, stay right there. I'm not going to do anything with you until we get married. And you're not married until you get a divorce. And you need to get a divorce from your first wife, Catherine. And Catherine is from what family? She's from the Habsburgs. Write this down. The Habsburgs are like, no. We are against a divorce. You understand that? We're against a divorce. Sorry, Henry, you're just going to have to make do when you die with a girl coming into your position as the next monarch of Britain, of England. And so the Pope's like, well, let me see, who should I go with? It's like, I like to make everybody happy, but I don't want to upset the Habsburgs. Because there's an interesting little fact about this. You ready? Not too long before Henry VIII's representative went to the Pope and said, hey, can you give a divorce between Henry VIII and Catherine? Not too long before that, the Pope, perhaps unwisely, took sides in a war in Europe between two great, powerful countries. One of them was France, and the Pope took the side of the French. The other was, guess which? The Habsburgs, exactly. Yeah. And guess who ended up being in a stronger position in that war? The Habsburgs. And guess what the Habsburgs, the Spanish, the Austrians, the Dutch, that controls all those areas. Guess what they did? They brought an army into Rome. The Habsburgs brought an army into Rome, sacked the city. Now, that's not paper and plastic. What happens in a city when it gets sacked? It's like a riot. It gets pillaged. It gets stuff taken away. And here is the Pope being carried off by the Habsburgs, basically wondering if he's going to live. He did live, and he would return back to Rome. But he's like, I need to be really careful now. I don't want to upset the Habsburgs again. So what's the Pope going to say to Henry VIII? Big, fat no. Sorry, Henry VIII. I'm in charge of the Catholic Church. I'm in charge of marriage and divorce. And I'm sorry, you cannot have a divorce. I'd like to help you out there, fella, but can't do. No. Sorry, no. So is that the end of the story? It's not the end of the story. Henry's looking around and going, I still got this issue. I got a wife, she's a nice lady and everything. I got a wife, my daughter, she's fine, and I don't know. I need a boy. I need a new marriage. I need some help. Write this down. Henry wasn't the only one that had this view. The top English nobility, many of them also had this view. They wanted to have Henry get a divorce. They wanted Henry to have a new wife. They wanted Henry's new wife to have a boy. Why is that so important? I mean, what is it? Like their country had been through like years and years and years of bloody war over who was going to be the monarch? Yeah, that was the war that took place, right before Henry VII and his wife came to the throne. The War of the Roses. So that was still kind of fresh in the minds of a lot of these nobles. So Henry VIII is like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And they came up with a solution. The church left the Catholic Church. What? They passed a law. Write it down. It's called the Act of Supremacy. The Act of Supremacy. It's right there. 1534. The Act of Supremacy. It's a law. It was passed by the nobles in Parliament. And Henry VIII is like, I'll sign that. That's a good thing. You're like, well, what the heck does it do? Well, I'll tell you what it does. It does a big thing. It takes the entire Church of England, all the Christians and priests and the whole thing that's located in England, and says, it's no longer part of the Catholic Church. They made a law taking the whole Church of England and said, I'm sorry, you're no longer part of the Catholic. So if you're no longer part of the Catholic Church, who's no longer the head of the Church of England? Pope. Very good. Very good. Write that down. The Act of Supremacy said the Pope is no longer the head of the Church of England. So the Pope has no authority over anything in England, according to the new law of England passed by their Parliament, of all these nobles there, and signed by the King. So guess, who do you suppose, Spencer, is going to be the new head of the Church of England? If not the Pope, who?
Probably Henry, or the King.
Good, write that down. Very good. The law made the King the head of the Church of England. Okay? Now that's going to be a bit controversial because people are looking around going, what? What? I don't understand. Are we having a Protestant Reformation in England? This is interesting because in the Protestant Reformation, I mean, what did Martin Luther do? What did John Calvin do? Did they keep within the Catholic Church? No, they're like, we're out of here. But what did this law just do? Yeah? Yeah, kick the Pope out. I mean, it's like, and yet, Is this about like all this stuff we learned about with Martin Luther and John Calvin and how all those things about the Protestant Reformation and indulgences and priests and how services were? No, what does this all have to do with? Yeah? Yeah, exactly. Him marrying another woman. So imagine this. You're Henry VIII, okay? You're Henry VIII, and you want to get a divorce from your wife. Who do you have to ask in order to get permission now that this new law, the Act of Supremacy, has just been passed? Who do you have to ask? Oh, no, you have to ask somebody. Who is it? It's kind of a trick question, isn't it? Who do you have to ask? Like, I want a divorce from my wife, and now I need to go to the head of the Church of England. And who is the head of the Church of England? Exactly. You are. Hello, King. Hi. How are you? Good. Can I get a divorce from my wife? Why, yes, of course. Done. Write it down. Henry VIII, under his own authority now, granted himself a divorce. Got it? That was easy. I mean, that was easy. And he already had a wife already set up to go. There she is, Anne Boleyn, wife number 2. Now, his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, was not happy. It's not like he didn't kill her. He packed her off to some house, a nice house, and there she raised the daughter, and it was like, oh my gosh. I mean, think of what Catherine of Aragon and the daughter, Mary, think of this new wife, number 2 here. They hate her. And did they recognize the new law? No. What do you call if some king marries somebody and they don't believe that first marriage is gone? This is like adultery. She's a harlot. She's a terrible person. And any child that comes from that marriage, true Catholics in England would say, that child is rhymes with astard. Yeah, that is not a legitimate heir to the throne. Do you see how the solution actually does potentially create some more problems? Yeah. What's that? Oh, yeah, we're going to get to that later. Yeah, that's coming up in today's notes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's got 6 wives, okay? We've only gotten to 2 so far. Okay? So, the whole reason, you get this? Write this down. The main reason for the Protestant Reformation, at least in the beginning in England, is so that Henry can have a divorce, so he can marry a second wife, and so that he hopes, have a boy. Because with a boy, then everything's going to work out just fine. Just fine. Right? Just fine. A couple things I need you to write down right now. Not everyone in England was excited about this. Okay? The nobles mostly were cool because they're like, hey, we need to make sure that there's a boy, and we're not going to have a big, huge, bloody civil war over who gets to be the next monarch, or that we end up like with some weak girl as the monarch and so forth. So a lot of the nobles, they're pretty cool with it. But, write this down, there were a fair number of people, Catholics, who believe in the Catholic faith, and they looked to the Pope, and they were not happy about it. Okay? Do you understand that? So already there's going to be some issues. Just like there were issues in other parts of Europe with the Protestant Reformation, and people are coming on this side and that side, and I believe this and I believe that and so forth. But one thing you should understand, you ready? The Church of England is not like the Calvinist church, and it's not like the Lutheran church. It's not Catholic, but it's not that far off from being Catholic. Do you follow? Henry didn't change that much in his church after he took it away from the Pope. You can write that down. Henry did not change that much in the church that he was the head of now. Here's what he changed, or here's what the law changed. 1, he's in charge of it now. Okay, fine, yeah, we got that part. So he's in charge of divorces and marriages and what have you. The only other real big change was, you ready for this? Within the Church of England now, priests could get married. That was probably the biggest change from the way things had been done. Priests could get married. Okay? Yeah. But did they change lots of other kinds? No. In fact, There were some Protestants, write that down. There were other people in England who were like, that's not enough Protestant. Thank you very much, Henry, for not having the Pope as the head of the church, but now do something about it. Let's get rid of all these religious holidays and saints and all this stuff that's very, very Catholic, and let's make it into a real Protestant church. Oh my gosh. Let's make it into a pure Protestant church. If you look at the top of the handout that I gave you, some of you guys are having that, some of you guys don't. If you look at the top there, you're going to see Anglican, as in English church. Okay? That's what they're going to call the Church of England. The Anglican Church. It means the same thing. If you were to go to this country and go, what is the Anglican Church? It's called the Episcopal Church. So it's one of the Protestant denominations, but it's not that far off from the Catholics. So in the Church of England, you got the Anglican Church, also known as the Church of England. But within England, you're going to have some other people who are Calvinists, who will refer to themselves at times as Puritans. And some of them even are going to get so frustrated, they're going to be like, give me a boat, get me the heck out of here, send me to North America. Where do those guys end up? Having the first Thanksgiving. The Pilgrims of Massachusetts. Oh, those guys. Yeah, we're going to see a whole bunch of interesting things coming out of this mix. But Henry's like, no, we're not Catholic. Forget that. I'm not going to go Puritan. I'm going to do my thing. Church of England. Got it? Church of England. We're going to still have a lot of the holidays and so forth and celebrations and the way things go in the Catholic Church, but, I'm in charge of it. So if I want to have a wedding with my new wife, everything's cool there that way. All right? So, good news, bad news. Good news. Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, now married, she gets pregnant. Ta-da! That was just what he had planned for. She's pregnant. Ho-ho! It's going to work out fine. Yes! He shows up on the day of his child's delivery, all excited to meet his new child. Can you imagine when you were born how one or both of your parents would have responded to you upon learning your gender? Do you know how Henry responded when he learned the gender of his new child? He was not happy. Write it down. Anne Boleyn, Queen Anne, his wife, gave birth to a girl. They named her Elizabeth. A girl. Henry was disappointed. A girl. He already had a girl. He had a girl with his first wife, for goodness sakes. What a disappointment. Is this going to be you're shaking your head, not a disappointment? It's like she's a girl, right? What could possibly be the result of having another girl? Is she ever going to get a chance to rule? I mean, she's the second of the two girls. As it turns out, she will. As it turns out, interestingly enough, when we get to the end of the story, Henry will have 3 children from his wives. 3 of them will become monarchs. 1 boy and 2 girls. And one of them is going to be historically recognized as a great ruler. Guess which one? Elizabeth. Yeah, Queen Elizabeth. After Henry is gone, there will be evidence, as I mentioned to you before. Girls can't rule. That's going to be the oldest. But girls can rule. That's going to be Elizabeth. So, you're like, so Henry, you're disappointed. You didn't have a son. Well, just, you've got a wife now. She's young. She could get pregnant again and so forth. And it didn't quite work out. It didn't work out. Miscarriages, things like that and so forth. And eventually Henry loses patience with Anne Boleyn. This is where Henry looks like a real jerk. Okay? Because Henry could be like, I'll just grant myself another divorce and pack off another ex-wife to some house in some other part of the country. No, this is where Henry actually looks like quite a bit of a jerk. Because here's the deal. The people around Henry are like, we're going to get rid of her. We're going to get rid of her. How can we officially get rid of her? Just push her down a flight of stairs? No, you can officially get rid of her if they've done something disloyal to the king. What would she do? What would Anne Boleyn do disloyal to the king? What would be disloyal to the king? Yes? Oh, you got that right. Write it down. Anne Boleyn is accused, the queen is accused of cheating on her husband. That would be so stupid. And in fact, history shows she didn't do that. And yet there's evidence. There is evidence. It's not very good evidence, but it's evidence. It's procured by torture. Some guy who's tortured says that he slept with the queen. And therefore, if the queen becomes pregnant and it's not the king's child, that's treasonous because that's going against the country. Who would do that? Who under torture would do that? Say that when it wasn't true let me see. Oh, yeah, right. In order for the torture to stop. So in order for the torture to stop, you confess to anything, even if it is your sister. Anne Boleyn's brother was tortured so that he confessed that he had relations with his sister, and then the torture is over, and he's executed. And what happens to Anne? She's executed, beheaded. Her head is chopped off. Dead. So little Elizabeth, her daddy had her mommy killed, officially. And it makes Henry look even worse, because Henry already had wife number 3 picked out. He already had his eyes set on her from the same little group that hangs out with the queen, the ladies in waiting. Who was the next lady in waiting who would then become the queen? Jane Seymour, wife number 3. Jane Seymour, his favorite wife. Why was he his favorite wife? Because she gave birth to a boy. Perhaps that was one of the main reasons she was his favorite. This is actually an inaccurate painting. It's got Henry VIII. He's a little bit older, a little bit more heavy set, not as vigorous and athletic as in his youth. And there's Jane Seymour, and there's the son, I don't know, probably about your age, maybe a little bit younger, not much. This wouldn't have been possible. This is a fake picture in the sense that Mom died shortly after childbirth. Write that down. Jane Seymour died shortly after childbirth. So, but Henry now has a legitimate son as the heir to the throne. And you're thinking, well, if the son is the heir to the throne, and then when Henry dies, little Edward becomes king, why did his 2 half-sisters ultimately become queen? Can you figure it out? Why is it possible that Edward's 2 older sisters, or half-sisters, become queen? What would have to happen to Edward for that to be the case? You're like, he died of natural causes when he was very young. So you can write that down. When Henry VIII ultimately died, little Edward was old. I mean, there he is. He's old enough to become the king, but he doesn't live very long. Never gets married, never has any kids. Edward dies. He's sickly. He dies very young. Meanwhile, just to finish out the story, Henry's like, well, let's have another wife. He looks at a painting of Anne of Cleves. She's from across the water, across the English Channel, and he looks at the painting and he's like, wow, she's great, let's do it. And he makes arrangements to get married to this woman sight unseen. Well, he did see the portrait, he was very impressed with the portrait, so he makes arrangements, she shows up, they have the wedding, and he goes, oh, she looks like a horse. And he immediately gets himself a divorce. So he gets divorced from wife number 4. And then he marries Anne Boleyn's cousin, Catherine Howard, who's quite a bit younger than he is. Catherine Howard, who doesn't have a lot of good sense, she actually does sleep around. Oops, gets caught, and is, boom, executed for treason. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, there's one more wife. Catherine Parr is the last one who marries Henry. A little bit closer to his age, she has actually outlived 2 previous husbands. And doesn't really bring any drama into the marriage. They live their lives together, and Henry VIII eventually dies. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. Who then will become the next monarch? Well, Edward. And who becomes the next monarch after that? Mary. And she's Catholic. What does she want to do to those Protestant nobles that are in the country? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. We're going to have to pick up on this story next time. They call her Bloody Mary because she kills Protestant nobles. Oh, look at the time. We've run out of time. More drama in the story of England. There's going to be a whole lot more death before we see Elizabeth come back on the throne. Okay? All right, very good.